Welcome back to Be the Standard. We are here today with a very special guest. His name is Seth Gehle. Seth reached out to me about 3 months ago, and ever since he did, I've been following all of his content really closely, following his story really closely. And what I've gotten to find out is that a lot of the things that he's experienced run parallel and things that I've experienced as well, with the exception of some very major things. But hey, man, it's great to have you here. I'm glad you're here to share your story with especially with me. I feel like, again, with all the parallels, I almost feel like I'm talking to somebody that I know and somebody that I can relate with. And it's kind of exactly why I decided to get into this space. So it's great to have you here.
Yeah, man. First off, appreciate you. Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for what you're doing. I've followed you since you started, and what you're doing, what a lot of guys are doing right now is good for, I think, what we just need in America in general. With the men supporting men, and we're just trying to bring some values back to the world and America, so that I think we're missing. So thank you for having me. Thanks for acknowledging and being here. So
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I think, obviously your story goes back from, childhood, kind of brings you to where you are now. And one of the things that I say all the time, and it's been in my Instagram for years, probably like a year and a half, and it's your struggle is the cost of admission to the life that you want, right? So I always look at the things that I've been through as, this is me paying the price. I've paid the price to get to where I am. And you can't, in my opinion, get to a high level of just personal values, personal success, and all these things that we cherish without paying a price for it. For some of us, the price is greater, I think. And, I certainly feel like you're doing wonderful things and very special things. And I certainly feel like you've paid the price for that. So I'm going to let you kind of take it away, because I want these people to hear your story and I want them to hear it from you. So, tell us where your story begins and kind of how we got to where we are now.
yeah, I like what you said there with the paying the price, right? I like that, and I look at it a little differently. It's just different words, same
Sure.
shit. But it's, the suffering that we endure creates the endurance. Endurance produces character. Character inspires hope. Without the suffering and the endurance, you can't be the person that you are, right? Life is full of tests. So every test we get, there's a reward, and that test rewards you with character. And if your character has been tested, then that is the point where you start to shine that light elsewhere, right? And you start to be that beacon, or maybe that lighthouse that is in the storm. It's experiencing all this turmoil. Whether it's rain, shine, or cloud, the light is there for other people to see you, to come to you, to find you. So that's where I'm trying to be right now. My character has been tested, and we're going to obviously cover that today, right? And if I can be that beacon where other people are like, holy shit, he gets it, or he knows, or he understands me, then that's what I need to be. That's my obligation now.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way, because I think you see a lot of people out there talking without without the resume to back it up, without the credibility to back it up. And when I, met you for the first time in person yesterday, and just talking with you and getting to know you more in person, and just seeing your story online and following your journey, I know that you have all the credibility in the world to speak to the things that you're speaking to, and people should be paying attention to you. They should be listening to you. And, I think what you're doing is really special, and I love it. Let's tell these people, why, not why they should listen to you, but tell them your story.
Sure.
I mean, it's incredible. So I'm excited to hear it from you. I purposely didn't do all the homework on it. I didn't want to know all of it. I just wanted to know what I knew and not know it all, because I wanted to hear it from you.
Yep. So my story starts off pretty quick and fast. My mom had us, I think, at like 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, something like that. She had us back-to-back years really early in her life.
So there's three of you? There's you and two siblings?
That's right. It was me and my two sisters. I'm the middle child. My older sister is 11 months older than me. My younger sister is 13 months younger. So we're really, really close. And so around the time I was about 2 years old, my mother got into a fight, and he ends up stabbing her in the back behind the ear and nearly kills her, right? So he goes to prison for that. I never knew my father growing up. And so my mother was raising 3 kids by herself. And so when you're growing up as with a single parent, you typically raise yourself anyways. You're doing the dishes, the laundry, you're cooking your own food, you're doing those things because mom has to work, right? So she's got to work. So there's going to be times when we're home alone. And back in the late 90s or mid 90s or whatever, that was more normal than than probably now. But it was very normal for us. We were home without our mother probably more than we were with her. And we managed ourselves. We took care of ourselves. But unfortunately, with that, when you're home alone without guidance and without a parent in the home, you end up doing like just dumb shit, right? As a kid, you end up going outside doing dumb shit. You're doing dumb shit in the house. You're setting things on fire. You're just doing dumb shit as a kid. And so one of those things was we found her porn collection. And we found my mom had this like real big porn collection. And so we found that when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I remember being like kindergarten, first grade-ish. And we found that and we started watching it and we thought it was funny and we took it outside and we showed the neighborhood kids and the neighborhood kids told their mom. And so their mom told my mom and my mom beat our ass for that. Right. But with that came this curiosity and this obsession with girls and sex, right? At a very young age. And at 5, 6 years old, I was trying to have sex with girls in my closet, particularly just one really. But my mom called us and she, asked like, hey, what are you guys doing? Trying to have sex? I said, no. The girl says yes. And the girl's very confused. She probably was not exposed to it the way that I was already. And she pulls me out, beats my ass, which I probably deserved. Like I said, though, I was just doing what I had seen on tapes and like explicitly, like obviously it's porn. So it's like, there's no hiding anything there. Right. So unfortunately I had this like deviant mind, maybe is a way to put it, at a very young age. And when kids are exposed to stuff like that, they start doing even more crazy things like setting shit on fire, right? That's like a sign of or like having an obsession with animals, like either killing them or just whatever. I never killed any animals, but there's some of these signs. Anyways, around the same time, because my mom was a single mother, we bounced around a lot. We couldn't afford rent. We couldn't afford different things. So we moved all the time. We moved at least once a year, if not 2 or 3 times a year. With that comes babysitters in and out of babysitters' homes. So when you're subjected to babysitters, unfortunately, if they're not torn up and corrupt themselves, their kids sometimes are, or maybe their kids are a little damaged. And unfortunately, I was molested around 5 years old by a babysitter's son. This guy was like 14, 15, 16 years old. And he, it was more like him exposing himself. I remember being in his bed with him and he would like expose himself and kind of like touching. I would touch him. He would touch me. And I knew it was wrong. But it's just like a strange, yeah, it's so weird, man. It's like,
is it almost like you knew it was wrong, but like you saw them as like an authoritative figure, so you just went along with it?
I don't know. It's like I don't know what that feeling is like. It's crippling.
Sure.
It's like somebody slaps you in the face and it's like it just stops you for a second. It's like, wait a minute, like is this supposed to happen? Or and then and what so you get paralyzed. It's freezing. You get paralyzed. And so as soon as you freeze, then it's over. Like now the train don't stop. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So it'd be similar like if I walked in here and I made a joke about your mom, right? And I said, hey, that's why your mom's dead. Okay. And then I came in here next week and I said the same thing. Even though that pissed you off today, if you don't say anything, I come back and say it next week. Well, now next week you're like, hey man, that's not funny anymore. And then what happens is the person who is making that joke, they're like, well, you were okay with it last week. Why are you not okay with it now? So when you touch somebody like a little kid and they let you do it, or even a grown adult, like you go and touch a woman, right? And she lets you do it. And then you come back 3 days later, you try to do it again. She's like, no, I don't want to do it anymore. And it's like, well, why not? We just did it 3 days ago. So that's kind of what happens when you freeze. It's almost like consent, right? It's like consenting in a way.
Yeah. And I've kind of heard that similar description from like female like sexual assault victims who have said, I kind of just froze and then it just like almost became normal or whatever the case is. But I've heard that before, that freezing analogy, and just feeling like lifeless, victimless, or lifeless, or like
Like that.
just whatever. Just
Yeah.
you're numb, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess.
exactly.
So I've heard that before, and just that's weird to me. Or crazy, actually.
Yeah. So it is strange. It's a weird concept. So anyways, that happened. I do remember reporting him. I don't remember how the whole situation went down, but I know I told my grandparents about it because my grandparents would be involved, and unfortunately we would still go back and be babysitted by those people. And I don't think the molestation with him continued, and that was like probably less than 5 times. I mean, it was probably 5, maybe 10 times, like situations. So, I don't know how much of that impacted me. It does not feel like it impacted me that much. I don't have any hate or anger or anything towards that guy for what happened. He was 14, 15, 16 years old. That's not normal for a kid that age to do that to kids. So chances are something probably happened to him where he felt this urge to explore and have that power over somebody.
Yeah,
So,
and that's another thing that you hear consistently, right? Is that people who perpetrate that on young kids, the statistics are outrageous. You probably know it. They're way more likely this to do it to others, right?
Yeah.
If you've been molested yourself as a child, chances are not that you're going to necessarily do it, but the people that do it have been molested far more often than those who haven't. It's wild that it's wild that type of behavior sticks with a person over all of those years, and it still remains in some capacity normalized.
Dude, it's crazy what it does to your mind. It really is, because it literally changes your mind. It changes your brain. It restructures wires. It crosses things, and you're confused. And there's, not to make excuses, I don't think there's, but unfortunately, the system fails people, and it just fails people. And that guy eventually would end up raping the girl next door a few years later, and he would go to prison for it. And he's got some mental issues, and I don't know where he went after that, but I know that happened, and I don't know if he's still in prison or what. But the system does fail people. Kids are put in bad places, like even foster care. 70%, I think now. I heard this on a podcast 2 weeks ago. 70% of kids in foster care are subjected to sexual abuse or some sort of exploitation, which is insane, so.
Yeah, that just gave me goosebumps because I spent 6-7 years in foster care, and I was lucky. I had the best foster mom that you ever could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
She was very special to me, and even up until into my 30s when she passed away. I think she passed away when I was 35, and she was at my wedding. She was so special to me, and we had such a great relationship. So when I hear that statistic, it frustrates me because I almost feel guilty, right? I always felt bad for myself as a kid when I was a kid for having to be in foster care and not grow up with my father and my real mother. But I've always been appreciative and grateful that I had such a wonderful, foster mom.
Right.
It makes me emotional because she was incredible. So
yeah. That's awesome, man. And I'm glad you have somebody like that to reflect on. I'll get to that point in my story later, but yeah. So molested at 5, right? Growing up with a single mother, father's not in the house. Boom, we're raising ourselves. Around 8, 9, 10 years old, my mom would end up meeting another guy. I think it was closer to probably 9 or 10. And she ends up meeting this guy who's the head of a church, pastor, preacher, whatever. I don't know what that title is officially, but nonetheless, he's the guy on the stage talking to people.
Sure.
And she meets him. He gets her hooked on crack and cocaine, right? So she had
pastor?
always, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my mom, excuse me, had always smoked weed and drank liquor. That was always a thing. We always had people at the house smoking weed. It was always a big thing. And 20 years ago, weed was the devil, right? You couldn't, it was a big deal. So we were always told what stays in our house or what happens in our house stays in our house. Don't tell anybody what's going on. This is our business, right? So my mom would start to become more abusive around that same time, right? 9, 10 years old. She was very physically, emotionally, and verbally abusive. And the physical things suck for sure. To get punched by your mom it's not fun. But the emotional damage that comes with it afterwards. So, when she would say things like, for example, one day she walks in, she hammer fist style like punches my sister multiple times in the face. Sure, her head's bouncing against the wall. I jumped on the other side of my bed and I was, crying. I didn't scream or anything. I was just terrified. I remember this day like vividly. I was mortified, like what was happening. And my mom looks at me at 10 years old and she's like, "What are you crying about? Like, stop being a little bitch before I give you something to cry about." And when I tell that story to people, sometimes it's like they almost don't believe me because it's like, there's no way your mom would have said that to you. It's like, no, dude, like this is real. And so that happened. A couple weeks later, I'm walking home from school. We weren't supposed to walk home from school in the first place. We always rode the bus, so we always got home at a certain time. Well, me and my cousins were taking our sweet time, just being a bunch of dumbass kids, messing around with shit on the way home. And we get home, and my mom was pissed. And she wasn't, like, mad that she couldn't find her son or she didn't know where her son was. She was pissed off for the inconvenience on her life, where she's like, "Where the fuck have you been? Like, go upstairs." So I go upstairs, and I remember we always had to, like, lay across her bed to get our whoopings, And she had this big wooden paddle, and if any of you grew up in the 90s or the early 2000s, you know what these damn things are, right? It's a 2x4 carved into a paddle. It's got holes drilled in it for optimal ass whooping, right? Like, that's what these things are designed for. So if it wasn't the belt, it was the paddle. If it wasn't that, it was a switch outside, So I don't knock, occasionally whooping your kids. However, there's a difference between whooping them and beating the shit out of them, And so what happened was I'm laying across her bed, and I remember like having, grabbing the blankets like I always did, and I always took the whoopings first anyways. Like if I ever got in trouble, like I always just got my first 3 out of the way and moved on with my life, right? Well, this particular day, the first time she hits me, I remember like the rebound off the bed. Like I remember getting hit so hard and coming off the bed, I was like, after that first strike, I'm like, oh shit, like this is going to be bad. Like it's crazy how much you can process in a half a second. As even to somebody in the infantry, this, right? When something happens on an objective, how much clicks, boom, it's like, oh, okay, where do we got to go, right? So the first time she hits me, I'm like, oh shit. And she hits me maybe another time, and I fell down because she was hitting me so hard. So I like fell to my knees where my ass was not in the frame or whatever, the sight picture anymore, I guess.
Yeah.
And she just keeps swinging, right?
Wow.
And so she strikes me across my back probably 3, 4, 5 times with this board. And once again, I'm 10 years old. I just got to be clear about that. I lay down on her floor after she gets done hitting me, and I'm crying, I'm screaming, and I look up at her like, I'm looking for like the apology, the love, hey, this is why I did it, or hey, I love you, I'm sorry, I overreacted, something, right? And all I got was, get the fuck out of here, go to your fucking room, And so I like low crawl to my bedroom, which is down the hallway, right? I get there and I just laid on my floor for hours and I cried. And truthfully, I mean, it did hurt, but I like I said, the physical part wasn't that bad, but I was like laying there emotionally damaged that my mom just beat the shit out of me and had like no remorse. There was no empathy or sympathy or no love. It was just like, get the fuck out of here. Like, you fucked up. You deserve that. And that is what scars you, right? The physical shit is not that bad. Mm-hmm. The emotional damage afterwards is what fucks you up. And so, in conjunction with without a father, the drugs that were coming into my house now, my sister actually at this point was smoking weed with my mom, who she would have been no older than 11 or 12, and she's sitting in a living room with a bunch of grown men smoking weed, passing a blunt around, which 11 years old, 12 years old, like you don't need to be smoking weed, man. Like that's not okay. That's going to lead you down a bad path. You're not able to handle those things and understand the magnitude of that at that age, right? So because of all that bullshit, and growing up without a father, I consistently had older friends that were like 2, 3, 4 years older, and they were always like the big kid in my grade, or as a kid that was a little bit older than me, right? And there's this kid who lived around the corner from me. For the sake of the story, I'll say his name is Jacob. Jacob is like 5 years older. I start hanging out with Jacob, and Jacob knows that I got a jacked up life at home. He knows my dad's not there. He knows my mom is mean and drugs and things like that. So Jacob kind of becomes my protector, for lack of better words, or that might be the perfect word, actually. But he invites me over. I'm hanging out with him all the time. And one day I'm over there and this guy walks in the front door. It's on the weekend. And this guy is 6'5". He's 380 pounds. He's a Hispanic guy. You can tell he's Hispanic, but he's got like a white complexion. He's very pale. He's got the Dahmer style glasses on. He's got long black slick back hair. It's like looks almost gelled back. And he walks in. He's got a big red shirt on, some shorts, tennis shoes, whatever. And he looks extremely kind, extremely friendly, but also like if he wanted to punch you, the shit would probably hurt. Like he didn't look sloppy for almost 400 pounds. He didn't look sloppy. He looked very capable. So like he looked like a damn left tackle. Like the dude was freaking massive. He walks in and he's like, hey, what's your name, Seth? You like football? Yeah, I love football. You like video games? Yeah, I love video games. We used to play like Madden and NCAA, all that back in the day. And so that was like my go-to games. And so he's like, oh, well, you should come up here and play video games with us on the weekends. And because he was going there to pick up Jacob and take Jacob to his house. And so I'm like, okay. And this guy's about 30 years old. And so I'm like, well, let me go ask my mom. So I asked my mom, hey, Mom, Jacob goes to this guy's house. Is it okay if I go with him? Yep, as long as you're with Jacob. Okay, cool. So go to his house. And on the way there, like I remember he drove like a white Honda Civic. And I think this was the first car that I had ever been in that had AC, which was like really cool back in the day. Like, I don't know. That was like one of the things I noticed was like it wasn't hot as shit in the car. And so we're riding up there. It's like a 20, 30-minute drive. We're listening to Metallica and AC/DC, and we're just like rocking out in the car. I'm like, damn, like, this is pretty cool. And I get to his house, and, you can cuss. We end up, he's got pop in the refrigerator, chips. We end up ordering pizza, and so it was awesome. Pop, pizza, chips, coffee, energy drinks. I'm 10 years old. There's 3 TVs, so everybody can play video games together. We don't have to take turns. There's 2 computers. There's a table in the middle of the room. He lives in this like big studio apartment, right? So there's no rooms. It's just one big room, right? And and so I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, this is like we're just going to play video games. And so that's what we did. We played video games all night long. I don't think I ever slept when I went to his house. If I did sleep, there was this like little rollout kind of thing I slept on behind this couch. But I know when I first started going to his house, I would notice that Jacob would sleep in his bed with him. And so his bed was like in the back left corner of the room, and it was blocked off by like some black curtains that hung from the ceiling. So there was no physical walls. It was just this curtain that hung from the ceiling that covered up his bed. You know what I'm saying? So you couldn't see it. And I noticed Jacob would sleep back there, but I just attributed it to like when you're young, you have sleepovers with friends, and sometimes you guys share a bed. It wasn't a big deal. So that's what I thought, right? And never dawned on me that something might be happening. And so this was the grooming process that I had fell into, right? Once again, unfortunately, when you grow up without a father, like I think you said earlier, you're already subjected to certain things, certain statistics, right? Whether it's being an alcoholic, a drug addict eventually, or abusive, or being abused, you're already part of this statistic pool. So in combination with all that, I fell victim to this guy, right? And so one side of the street, I'm living at home with my mom Monday through Friday, dealing with the instability of a house, people in and out of my house, drugs, violence. And then the other side of the street, I know I'm going up to this guy's house. And for the first 3 months, it really wasn't anything crazy. It was actually a lot of fun because he was grooming me and he's getting me ready basically for what he's going to do, right? So the first 3 months was cool. And what's crazy about this, so just for context, this house that I lived in with my mom, some of these like childhood trauma, tragic moments in my life were like one of the things that happened. My house would end up getting broken into 3 times. 2 of the times I was there, right? At 10 years old, I remember being in my bed and my sister comes and wakes me up. One of my sisters has a knife. The other one has an alarm clock in her hand. Like she has the cord wrapped around so she can swing the alarm clock, right? Like a weapon. And they're like, Seth, somebody's trying to break in. And this was maybe, 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, maybe 9, I don't know. But my mom had just left. So my mom would work at night, 12-hour shifts. So we would go to sleep. She would go to work. and we were just there home alone at 10, 11, 12 years old or whatever, 9, 10, 11. So my sisters come in and they're like, somebody's trying to break in. And I'm thinking like they're fucking with me. But I see the knife and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, okay. So we go downstairs. My back door has a 2x4 like nailed into the wall, so that you can't open up the damn back door, right? It's got a handle and a deadbolt as well. And sure as hell, 3 guys are kicking in our back door and we're home alone. And we have, excuse me, we have nothing in our house, right? We have nothing that's worth value. So I don't know what they were going to do, which is scary to think about now because at the time I didn't realize that. And actually, it took me a few times telling this story to realize that they were, I don't know what they were coming for because like I said, we didn't have anything. We didn't have money. We didn't have like an abundance of drugs in our house, not that I knew of anyways. Mm-hmm. So they were kicking in the door. One of them had a baseball bat. One of them had a sledgehammer. And one of them had like a shovel or some sort of blunt object, I can't remember what it was, but they had 3 like kind of blunt objects and they're kicking in, and I'm like literally watching this door like inch away, seeing the nails pull out of the frame. Like I'm like, oh my God, these guys are about to break in, and we're standing there in the kitchen watching this happen, and we're basically 3 little kids like ready to go to war with whoever comes in. I mean, these guys would have obviously beat our ass and did whatever they were going to do to us. Mm-hmm. It's just terrifying to think about that. So that jacked me up. Like maybe 2 weeks later, it happens again, right? And the second time it happened, they get into the house, but our neighbors had come through the front door maybe or something. I'm not really sure. All I remember is I woke up in my neighbor's arms, and I wake up in his arms, and I'm like, I can tell we're going through my house. And he says, I've got you. Somebody broke in. Don't worry about it. I've got you. And so we go to the neighbor's house. And so the first time and second time it happened, our neighbors were there, right? And the first time that happened, the neighbors called the cops. Cops came, and my mom had to come home from work. And, I think the cops left, and we just went back to sleep. It was just like, okay,
yeah,
see ya. There was like no therapy, no like, hey, are you okay? Like, it was just like, yeah, we're fine, I guess. But, when that happens to somebody, like, you need to freaking talk about it, especially with kids. So just I tell those stories just for some context of like where I lived, what was going on in the house, like some of these traumatic events that were happening, right? And so eventually we would leave that house and we'd go to another house with this guy that had gotten my mom addicted to the crack and cocaine. And
the pastor?
Yeah. And this guy was a piece of shit. His name was Jamie. He's this light-skinned dude. He had cornrows. He's missing a couple teeth. And I knew he was a piece of shit when I met him. Like, I knew the minute I met the guy, I was like, this guy, you could just tell. And he was very charismatic, very well-spoken, very confident, but I could see right through it.
It's funny, like, because, when you grow up in an environment like that, I feel like you learn at such a young age to read people and really recognize what it is that you see that makes sense, what you see that doesn't make sense. You recognize what you want, what you don't want, what looks right, what doesn't. So yeah, and another thing I'm very impressed with is the level of detail that you remember things.
Yeah.
The bed was in the corner and, all of this stuff, because when I look back at the shit that I went through, I remember very little.
Really?
And the stuff I do remember, I don't like.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm impressed by the fact that you remember it all, which means you probably dealt with it better and processed it better. Who knows? But not to cut you off, but just wanted to make that point because I think it's important. Because I think, you when you grow up in that environment, you pick up on things and you never stop. Like you carry that with you. Like, I bet you're great at reading people.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I'm glad you said all that. Right, a couple things here. I tell people all the time, when you grow up the way that I did, you have to learn how to read people. You need to learn how to read your environment. You need to learn, okay, when you're walking home from school or you're walking somewhere in a bad neighborhood, you need to see that guy across the street and say, okay, is he a threat or not? Even last night we're eating food, right? And this guy, whole homeless guy, pulls up next to us, and it's like we all played it cool, right?
That was funny.
But you got to understand, like, this guy's a threat. Like, is he a threat or not, right? And you have to read the room. You don't want to overreact, because if you overreact, well, now he's going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. If you just let him do his course, he'll keep it moving, right? But sometimes People are threats. And so as a young kid, even at 8, 9, 10 years old, you start to understand threats and you start to understand people. And is this person a threat? Do I need to protect myself? Do I need to run? Do I need to be ready? Right. So unfortunately, you go through that when you grow up like that. Right. So the second thing I'll say with the detail has come in time. It was not always like this. So especially because I'm writing a book and we'll talk about that later. But as I wrote my book, I have journaled and been like, holy shit, like I forgot all about that. And I start to remember these details. So whenever I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, dude, write your shit down. Because when you're talking, it's out, it's gone. But if you write, you can go back and add and delete and you can fix it and get those details that you're missing, right? And as you tell it more and more and more, you'll start to be like, oh my God, man, I forgot all about that shit, And you start to put the senses, the sights, the smells, the taste, the feelings of things, and it really helps you capture what you went through. To your point about his studio, right? I actually want to have an architect build his studio for some reason. I don't know why. I think it would just be cool to have like a model, whether it's digital, just to have a model of his apartment so I can explain to people like it's almost like if I built it out of Legos or something, just so I can show people like this is. Because it just helps give context when you tell that story that way, right? And the way I describe his bed and the curtains adds to the story later. So I'll get to that, right? So dealing with my mom and all the bullshit, we leave that house and we go to this next house. Okay, this next house was the last place I lived with my mom, and it was a total shithole. They're called doubles. I don't know if we have them in the South, but in Ohio. They're called doubles, and it's a house with one family lives on one side, another family lives on the other side. So we go to this house, and my bedroom had hardwood floors, and it smelled like shit because the people that lived there before me had dogs, and their dogs were just locked in that room, and so it just smelled like piss and shit in there. It was fucking disgusting. And my mom, I was about 12 at this time, she puts me in that room. Like, no questions asked. She's just like, this is your room, And the hardwood floors were buckled all the way across. So they're like rigid and they're sharp. And hardwood floors will buckle when there's weather. If they're subject to weather, they'll literally crack and just turn up. And so that happened because my bedroom ceiling had a hole that was like 2 feet wide, about 4 feet deep. You could literally see straight into the attic above. And so when it rained and snowed, came straight into my room. The elements were in my room with me. And I slept on this little 4-inch mattress, or maybe 4 inches. I don't know. It was like this little pad basically on the floor with a thin little blanket. I pissed myself every single night. I woke up freezing in my own urine every single night. At this point, I was very suicidal. I was very ready to kill myself.
How old were you at this point? Sorry.
About 11 or 12.
Gotcha.
Yep. Excuse me. So, and the grooming process, so this is like Monday through Friday living with mom, right? Friday night, Saturday night, this guy would come and pick me up. And after 3 months or so, the grooming process had taken its course and he had started to molest me, right? And when he started to molest me, at this point, I was going to his house every single weekend, like 45 to 50 weekends out of the year, I was at his house. At this point, I knew his mom, I knew his sisters. I had been to his Christmases, his Thanksgiving, like holiday events. I would go to his family's events because I wasn't going to go to mine, or if I did, I'd go to his and mine because my family fucking sucked, So I would go to his family events, and this 30-year-old man is bringing this 10, 11, 12-year-old boy to his events, and nobody said anything. Which is kind of confusing now, but yeah, I mean, over the course between like 10 to 12, he was molesting me, and he would molest me every single weekend, right? I would go to his house, and when I first started going to his house, it was a lot of video games and a little bit of like touching, right? And then over the course of maybe 6 months, a year, it became a lot of touching and a little bit of video games. And it was like, the first time he touched me, I was still 10 years old. It was about 3 months into knowing him. I remember sitting on his lap. I started to sit on his lap because his apartment was so cold. It was always freezing cold in there. He's a big dude. He runs hot. So it was always freezing cold in there. And I remember now, as I've told the story more and more, I actually just picked this up the other day, but I remember the first time, he would tell me like, or I would say I'm freezing or I'm cold or I want a blanket, and he always had a blanket. And so he'd say, well, why don't you sit on my lap and we'll just stay warm under the blanket. Do you want to get under the blanket together? And so after a while, it just became normal for me to sit on his lap, and that's just like if you have an animal that's outside in the cold and you bring him in because it's warm, well, then you start to feed him and then you start to give him water and then you start to, now you can beat the shit out of this animal and it doesn't matter. He's going to keep coming back because he's conditioned. You've got him. It's just, that's just how it is. And that's what happened with me, right? So because my home life, now I'm at his house. Well, now he's got me in his house, right? Well, now he's going to start feeding me pizza and pop and drinks. And well, now it's cold. So, well, I have one blanket. Do you want to get under the blanket with me? Right? So now it's just boom, boom, boom. These things are just stacking, right? Yeah. And because it got comfortable for me to sit in his lap, it was just like a normal thing. And I would even sit in his lap with my friend Jacob right next to us. This kid who's 5 years older than me, 6 years older than me, I'd sit there and Jacob is sitting next to us, right? So one day Jacob goes, he leaves. This is on a Sunday. Jacob leaves, go get some tacos, and I'm sitting there on his lap. We're watching football, and his left hand is on my left hip, and his hand drops off, brushes my ass, and he says, "I'm sorry." I said, "Oh, it's not a big deal, whatever." I'm thinking like if me and you bump each other in the hallway, my bad. So he puts his hand back on my ass, and he says, "So this is okay." And at that point, I knew my life was about to go downhill.
Sure.
I felt like at the top of a roller coaster. When you hear that last click and you're like, oh shit, here we go, And that's how it felt. And I froze. Dude. And we went for the ride.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not trying to cut you off, but that must have just been like, holy shit, like a holy shit moment, but almost like a particular level of betrayal.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, I've been trusting this guy. He's been treating me so fucking good. And now he's touching me in weird ways and he's asking if it's okay. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. And that's exactly it. I mean, literally, like, what the fuck, man? Like, I'm thinking to myself that at 10 years old, I'm like, God damn it, dude.
Yeah.
And I'm like, here we go. Boom, we hit the last click. Time to take the ride. And we go down the fucking roller coaster, man. And that fucking roller coaster went on and on and on. It just never fucking stopped. And there was highs and there's lows, There were good moments and there were really bad moments, And from that point forward, it was like an insatiable desire for him. Nothing would satisfy him, right? So touching wouldn't satisfy him. The weird shit he would say to me, we would eventually go back to his bed and we'd lay in his bed for hours and hours and hours, like 3, 4, 5 hours. And he would talk to me about how much he loved me, how much I meant to him. He would kill himself if I wasn't in his life. And at 10, 12 years old, that's a lot of shit to process. Like you've got this grown man who's telling you, I'm the only thing that matters to him. Like, Jesus Christ, like, what do I do with that, So he would touch me, and it quickly escalates from him just touching me to, within a week or two, his hands are in my shorts, right? And I can feel his hands today. That's the one thing about this you'll never forget. This is the life sentence that I serve, right? I know what his rough, calloused hands feel like. He had these really calloused hands. He had knuckles that were so rough, he could rub them together, and it sounded like rocks. Like, it literally sounded like rocks rubbing together. And so I remember what his hands feel like just touching me, and he had long nails, and so there's some disgusting things that would happen, because it's all escalation of force, right? So touching to talking to, using his fingers on me, right? He would start to try to use his fingers, penetrate me with his fingers. And I remember telling him, like, it hurts. And he's like, well, why does it hurt? Like, what's wrong? Like, he's like telling me to relax, and he's got Vaseline and like all this like nasty shit, right? And I tell him, like, well, your nails hurt. And this fucking guy, I come back the next weekend and his middle finger is missing the nail. So being the gentleman that he is, right? This kind, fucking loving man, he fucking trims his nail so that he can use his fucking finger on me. Mm-hmm. And that's a different level of disgusting. You know what I'm saying? When you are making accommodations to fuck a little kid or rape a little kid or whatever it is, right? And so he does that, and then it just continues, and then it continues to oral sex, where he's performing oral sex on me like every single weekend, sometimes twice a weekend. And then you start to talk about the reciprocation of these things, right? Where he's touching me. Well, now it's time for me to reciprocate love, right? If you love me, then why aren't you doing these things, you know? Another, this is like hard to say, and this is probably gonna be hard to hear, but another thing that happened was I did not understand this for a very long time, well into my adulthood, because I don't do this. But when I had reached into, I remember him telling me to touch him, right? And so he opens his shorts up, and I'm like laying in his bed, and I didn't want to do this shit. I was like, I was disgusted. I was just like, God, it makes me shake now thinking about it. But I remember he pulls my hand into his shorts and he makes me touch him, and I remember what all this shit feels like. It's fucking disgusting. But his shorts were soaking wet, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this guy's like pissing himself, because I'm 10, 11 years old. I'm like, I've not gone through puberty yet. I don't know what any of this is. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? And come to find out as I've grown into adulthood is that he would get so like aroused that he would have his underwear were soaked and like pre-ejaculate.
That's crazy.
Right? To think that this 30-year-old man's laying in a bed with a little boy and he's so aroused that he's almost having a orgasm without even being touched, it's just fucking disturbing.
That's a whole other level of anything I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's disgusting, man.
You know, obviously you hear these things and they're difficult to hear, but at the same time, it's important because this shit happens, and I think a lot of people, like, you know, especially like, I understand the abuse part of it, physical, mental, all that stuff from experience, but that I don't fucking get, and I don't think I'll never understand it because I didn't experience it, but that is just, it's tough to hear.
Yeah, man. Dude,
like,
it's fucking crazy. So that would happen, right? And that the reason why I tell that story is because I just want people to understand how bad this shit is, man.
Yeah.
And I just want people to understand, like, we got to protect these fucking kids. And you've got to, I wish the government would do more. We'll get into that maybe. But I just, like, these people are disgusting and they're ruining people's lives for a fraction. Like, he got what happened to him eventually would be a fraction of what has happened to me, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, these things would continue. And by the time I was 12, 13 years old, I think it was around 13, everything that you can perform sexually with somebody in bed had happened to me with this grown man. Everything. Like, every bit of sexual whatever you can do had happened to me, okay? And, like, I know my first orgasm was with this man, right? And I remember the first time that happened. And he looks up at me because he's performing oral sex on me. He looks up at me and he's like, did you enjoy that? And, like, what am I supposed to say? I just had an orgasm. Like, what am I supposed to say? Like, no. And so I'm sitting there like 12 years old. I'm like, what the fuck, man? And so you're going through puberty, right? And so he starts to make comments about, like, oh, you're growing in hair and this and that. Like, he's like proud to, like, see you grow into a man, you know? And he would start to tell me, like, I can't wait till you're 18. You know, all we got to do is wait a few more years, and then we don't have to hide this anymore, you know? So you get into this.
Say that to you?
Oh, yeah.
So his plan wasn't just this sexual, you know, this sexual pleasure. His plan was like a full-blown relationship when he was able to, you know, get you to the proper age.
Yeah. Yep. Dude, oh man, it's just crazy. And you know, it's crazy to think that I'm fortunate in my situation, because in other places it's not like that, right? In other countries, it's like, we're going to abuse this child until they're 12 and then we're going to kill them, or they're going to die from an overdose because they're high on heroin or meth, and there's 30 of them in this room and we can pick whichever one we want. You know, so I'm certainly lucky in certain aspects.
And it's funny too, because I've said this on my podcast several times, where I've always, since I was a little kid, been like, you know what? Somebody out there has to have it worse. Like, somebody's got it worse, so you need to just stop fucking feeling sorry for yourself. And I've told myself that a million times. I still, to this day, I'm just like, you know what, Denny, like, you went through some shit. Be happy you went through it. And I'm not saying you should necessarily be happy that you went through it, but there's always somebody that has it worse. And for you to take that approach as well, and it's refreshing to hear, but it's sad because you shouldn't have to.
Right, you shouldn't have to. And so I don't. The thing with saying that is, sometimes people, and I've done it myself with writing my book, because I wrote my book out twice and I deleted the whole thing without even saving
I'm
shit.
in that phase now.
Yeah. So, and what I did is I got 20,000 words into my book, and I'm like, this story's not that bad. Like, it's not that bad. And so I just deleted it. I'm like, nobody gives a fuck, right? And the thing is your story is your story, and it doesn't matter if you fucking fell down and you skinned your knee going to Chick-fil-A. Like, that's your fucking story, man. Like, it matters to you, and if it only matters to you, then so be it. So with my story, yes, there are certainly people that have had worse, and there are certain people that have had less, you know. So, but it's still, if I can take my story and help those people who have had it worse or not as bad and heal and grow, that's the point. So
yeah. Sharing your story is not a mechanism
Yeah.
to compare yourself to others.
Right.
It's a mechanism to hopefully just make people aware of what's out there and what you've overcome. And hopefully people can use that as a tool themselves to just, become better. It's certainly not a comparison mechanism or tool to, I did this and I've been through this. And so my story is worse than yours. And let me tell mine because it's better. That shit's irrelevant. I mean, it's all about you and your message. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, and I say this all the time, you go to a job, your boss has a job to run a business. He doesn't give a fuck about what's going on at home. He doesn't care about your story because everybody has their own shit that they're going through.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you can just touch, a handful of fucking people and change a handful of people's lives, and that's all I'm here to do. I don't care how many listeners, followers, whatever. I mean, the more the merrier, right? But this is about helping people and getting a story out there, and hopefully people resonate with it and understand that I'm not stuck where I am. My past doesn't dictate, what happens in my future, and I can be who and whatever the fuck I want to be.
Yeah, man. And so, yeah, like life would continue to kind of happen to me, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so this all happened around 12 years old or so. And my mom was eventually taken away from me. She ended up stabbing her boyfriend in the bathroom over some drugs. And that whole day was crazy in its own. Like, that day alone would take me an hour or two to explain. But I remember coming outside and seeing a fire in my front yard. My mom storming around, screaming, yelling. She's high. Her boyfriend comes out. He's got blood all over the front of his shirt.
Same guy, the pastor?
Yeah. And so then my mom's put in the back of this car. I'm looking at my mom in the back of the car. She's being taken away from me. And that was really hard. That was, despite all the bullshit we'd been through, that's my mom, And so she gets taken away. And over the next 4 months, I basically bounced around to random houses. I lived with like a cousin. Yeah. I lived with my dad for like a month. I lived with some other random people. And this whole time, my abuser is keeping tabs on me. I'm still hanging out with him on the weekends. And crazy enough, I was a straight A student this whole time. I was a perfect student in school. So, it's just really, really wild time. And right around Christmas so when I was turning 12, or when I was 12, that year during Christmas, my mom called me. I think it was like right before or right after Christmas. It might have been like January time. And my mom calls me and she's like, where are you at? I'm going to come and get you. And at 12 years old, I'm very impressed with myself with this. I was able to tell her and to somehow maintain this level of resolve to say, I don't want to live with you. And that's fucking hard to do.
Yeah.
Like, to tell your mom that's very hard. And she gets on the phone. She's like, fuck you. Like, I'm going to come and fucking get you. Like, you're my fucking son.
Jesus.
Yeah. And she's like, you're my responsibility. And I'm like, I break down crying. The family that I was living with offered to adopt me at that point because they're like, you don't want to live with your mom. We get it. We know it's happening. Let's adopt you. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, they don't know me. And, we're not related. So...
Was this a foster?
No, this was
situation?
Just a random friend.
Gotcha.
So since we're not related, there's not much of an opportunity. So somehow my grandparents get contacted. My grandparents pick me up.
Yeah.
I go to my grandparents' house. They ask to adopt me. I say yes. And so that year, the year that I turned 13 was the year that I was adopted. So from January, February timeframe.
By your grandparents?
Yep.
Okay.
From January, February-ish to August, the adoption process had started. And by August, which is my birthday, around that time was when the all the paperwork went through because I remember celebrating my birthday and having like a birthday party and the adoption paperwork coming in, and it was just that kind of cool timing because it was my birthday was coming up, and so really really happy about that. And so I was finally like in a stable home. My sisters unfortunately went back to my mom's house. They didn't want to be adopted, and that's just a whole nother conversation about being abused. You just seek that pain and discomfort, and it's just what you're used to.
It's normal.
It's normal, yeah. So they unfortunately went that route. I stayed with my grandparents, and once again, it's the weekend, and I want to go hang out with my friend, right? So I tell my grandparents, well, I want to go hang out with my friend.
That guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so at this point, we're going up on like 3 years of abuse from him, right? And I'm still like defending him, going to his house. My grandparents are like, nope. And
Did they know?
No.
Did they? But they just knew you had this friend and you wanted to go see him, and
Yeah.
they didn't know anything about anything.
Nope.
And did they ask a lot of questions about like, hey, I want to know who this guy is?
Yeah.
or-
Yeah. So they ask like, well, we want to at least meet him because they're at first they're like, fuck no.
Which is fair.
Right. So like, well, we at least want to meet him. So he shows
Yeah.
up, and he kind of like probably says something along the lines of, I know Seth's had a rough going, and I'm just, we just play video games, and I'm just trying to help him out, and I've known his friend Jacob, and Jacob's hung out with us, and this and that. And he makes him smile, makes him laugh, and he wins them over. Because these people that do this to kids are incredibly smart. They're strategic. They're calculated. They're apparently there's literally a playbook out there on this shit. Which is disturbing to think about. But even before technology, these people they all did the same things to kids. So it's just like this innate it's just manipulation is all it is at the highest level. So he manipulates my grandparents. He becomes even more closer to me because at my grandparents, since I had a family and he knew my grandparents, he became very close in my family where he would come over for our holidays. And so now, not only am I the 10-year-old at his family or the 12, 13, 14-year-old at his events, I have this 30-year-old friend that I'm bringing to mine. And
Because again, it goes back to him and his mind. This is a relationship.
Yeah, it is.
This isn't just like this. Like, because a lot of these guys, like you read about it, you hear about it, like they treat these kids as toys.
Yeah.
And they got like a lineup of them. But with you, it seems like he this was a relationship to him. He was like, this is like when you bring a girl home to meet your parents.
exactly.
Like he's meeting the grandparents, making them laugh, working his way in, and just manipulation at the highest level. Disgust, really.
Yeah, it's crazy to think too because so he ran a haunted house in his hometown. This town,
I think I saw this in your other interview. Holy shit.
Yeah. So Bluffton, Ohio is this small little town. There's like maybe 4,000 people, right?
Yeah.
So on Main Street, his mom lived on Main Street, had a Victorian style house. She had a wraparound porch. There's like two sides. And I would actually help him run this haunted house and scare kids and shit like that. But at the end of the line, he was there and he handed out candy. He was the one that gave candy to all the kids in the neighborhood. And just victim. Which one doesn't have a father? Which one looks a little scared? Which one looks maybe
calculated?
Yeah. Which one looks hungry? Which one looks abused? Which one can I get? Which one do I know? And it's just disgusting, man. And if the parents come through, where's the single moms at? How can I tap into this child, right? And so, anyways, so I'm back at his house, and around the time I turned 13, he rapes me for the first time, right? And this was like a long time coming because I was very hesitant. I was very like, I don't want to do any of this shit. I was very present, where a lot of times when this happens to people, somebody who gets raped or abused or whatever, they're able to like go somewhere else in their mind. They take themselves somewhere else, or they put somebody else in that body for them to take the pain and the suffering, right? I was never able to do that. I was very present. I was very aware of what was going on, and like I just suffered the entire time. And so the first time, he rapes me, I was about 13 years old, and I remember that whole night. Like the details of being naked and the feeling the Vaseline, and when he's finished, the feeling of like the exhaustion and the relief from him, right? Because he just finally got to do what he had been wanting to do for years. And so, at this point, I'm like, did this guy just like lose his virginity with me? I don't know, right? And so I go to his bathroom and I'm sitting on his toilet at 13 years old, and I'm like getting the rest of this shit out of my body. And I'm thinking to myself, like, my life's over. I've got to kill myself. Nobody's going to love me. I'm never going to have a family. I probably have HIV. I probably have like AIDS or some sort of disease. If anybody finds out I'm gay, I slept with an old man. I'm all these different things, right? And kids are brutal. So I can't, who am I going to tell? Like, I can't tell anybody. He's everybody's best friend. He makes everybody laugh. As a matter of fact, he would joke about this to other people. He would joke about it in public settings. We would hang out with other adults. And he would joke about like, okay, well, it's time for us to go home because I'm going to go fuck Seth tonight, or Seth's going to blow me tonight. And everybody's like, ha, 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 real funny. And I'm like,
It takes balls to even say something like that.
dude,
Holy shit.
Well, if my wife was right here, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to go home and cheat on my wife tonight.
Yeah, who talks like that?
Yeah, it's like, so it's hiding in plain sight is all it is, right? Yeah. And so 13 years old, he rapes me for the first time. And this would continue for the next 2 years, for 2 more years, 2.5 more years probably. And, I don't know how many times like the rape occurred. It was a handful of times. I don't really know exactly, but the molestation and the sexual acts and the rape and all that was just every single weekend, and it was relentless. And so I was about a month away from being 16. And I'm up at his house, and I'm with this younger friend of mine who's hanging out with us. And I could see the guy start to groom the younger kid, and he takes him back into his bed one night. And this was the first time I remember that kid going back there. And I just told myself, like, this is it. The buck stops here. Like, this shit's not fucking happening to him. Because I could handle it, and I could deal with it. And I'm very proud of the things I've been through because I got through them. And I'm glad that I was the one to go through them because so many kids don't make it. There was just a kid who killed himself the other day, who's 10 years old, killed himself because he was being bullied. And like,
saw that.
Yeah. So many kids who don't make it. So many adults don't make it in life. And I'm still struggle today, but I'm glad that I'm here. And I'm glad that I was there at that night to see this because the fucking buck stopped. And I fucking text my friend Jacob on the video game. And I said, hey, man, I need you to meet me at my house tomorrow. And that weekend I was molested and raped, and I go home that weekend on Sunday, and I've got this guy's filth on me, right? And Jacob comes to my house, and I'm telling Jacob, I'm like, hey, man, like, I got to tell you something. I don't know how to say this. I've been wanting to say this for a long time, and I'm panicking, and my heart rate's going up. I'm sweating, and I'm having this, like, out-of-body experience. And Jacob, I can't tell you. I just don't know what to say. Like, how do I say this? And he looks at me, and he's like, he says, he touched you, didn't he? And I'm like, I fall apart. I fall to the floor. I'm crying. There's a hardwood floor, and I'm just like grabbing at the floor, and I'm like punching it. And I'm just like, God damn it, dude. And I'm like, obviously the answer is yes. And the next thing that happens, like maybe 5-10 seconds later, Jacob goes, he did it to me too. And I'm just like, what the fuck, man? I'm like,
well, you had spent time with them together before and noticed that he had been in bed with Jacob before as well. So you must have suspected it at that time?
Nothing.
After? No, really?
Nothing. I was in complete denial.
I bet.
That weekend, man, I'm telling you, dude, that Sunday I was going home, I was so fucking scared because I knew I was going to do this, but I was fucking terrified because of denial, rejection, like nobody's going to believe me, and you're just about to admit the most shameful thing that you could possibly admit. And I tell you this about the curtains and shit, right? Mm-hmm. That younger friend that I decided to protect, that weekend I was raped.
Right.
My friend was there 20 feet away. The only thing separating us was a fucking curtain. And I'm in this man's bed being fucking raped and molested. That was like the audacity that this guy would operate with, And so I was oblivious to what was going on. That it could have happened to my older friend Jacob. I thought I was the only one. I knew it was about to happen to my younger friend because I could see the signs. So I decided, I was like, no, this is it. So Jacob's like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to report him or do you want to keep it a secret? I'll follow your lead, man. Like, whatever you want to do. I'm like, fuck him. Like, we got to get this motherfucker. Mm-hmm. Like, those were my words.
So you reported him?
Yeah. And so we go out, we tell my grandparents.
I thought the story was going to go in a whole violent direction. Like, we went over there, we fucked him up.
Oh, man.
A part of me was hoping that, but I'm glad. I mean, you don't need to be a felon.
Yeah.
No, good for you. So, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, so we go out, we tell my grandparents, and, we tell my grandparents, and they, my grandma's torn apart.
Sure.
It's really heartbreaking to think because my grandma adopted me and she got to see me eventually get married and have kids, or at least my daughter. And she's not here anymore. Unfortunately, she died when I was in Afghanistan. And I wish she could see the things that I'm doing today because I know she'd be so proud of me. God damn, that makes me hurt. That makes me hurt bad. But I wish you could see the things that I'm doing today because she was so destroyed in that moment because this was the second time it had happened. And this guy had been in our house many, many times, Christmases and birthdays and holidays. And so I just feel fucking horrible for I just wish my grandma could see it. So anyways, we go to the hospital. Police officer comes in and they're like, well, how are we going to go get this guy right now? And so this is where another part of my story that I'm very proud of is that at 15 years old, I knew to not take a shower. I knew to not change my clothes. I knew that I needed, I'm going to get this motherfucker. And so I go in there and I tell him, he raped me this weekend. And I'm like, I have his DNA on my body right now, which is fucking disgusting to think about. And so,
but the fact you had the foresight to know that is impressive.
Yeah.
It fucking sucks that it had to be, your wit and skills had to be put to the test in that way. But the fact that you were present enough to even think of those things and know that hey, I can't just accuse this guy because if not, without any proof, it's just my word against his, and I'm going to need some physical evidence, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Holy shit. So the fact that you were...
That's exactly what the nurses said. They were the nurses were like, do you have any clothes at home? Do you have anything at home that you wore? When was the last time you were at his house? And I was like, fucking 12 hours ago, he raped me, And they're like, oh my God. They're like, take your clothes off. And I take my clothes off. They go test them. They find his DNA in several places on my body and my clothes. And I tell him about the Vaseline. I tell him there's a towel next to his bed. There's a towel next to his bed where he cleaned me up. And I guarantee that towel has Vaseline, his DNA, and mine on there. So, long story short, this whole day, once again, is a whole nother 2-3 hour story probably. But they go back and the cop goes up there, gets him to admit to... The only thing he admits at that moment was that I performed oral sex on him. That was it. That was the only thing he would say. But he does admit it. Out of custody as well. So they don't, so there's a whole other bunch of details. But the cop is able to go to his studio apartment and based on the stories that I had told him, was able to go straight to his room, found the towel, found the Vaseline, done deal. So a month later, he pleads guilty to 11 counts of, this is fucked up. He pleads guilty to 11 counts of sexual misconduct because at the time I was 15 years old. I was almost 16. We had no proof that he raped me when I was 12 or 13, okay? But because he had raped me at maybe 14, 15, and it just happened again, it was only sexual misconduct. It wasn't rape. It wasn't this.
But why? Because it had to do with your age?
Yeah. In Ohio, from what I got, the cop told me, in Ohio, if you're 13, it's rape. If you're 14, it's sexual misconduct. And even though this guy is 30...
Even though a minor is a minor and
Yeah, dude.
That makes no fucking sense.
So this is... What's even worse is the guy pleads guilty to 11 counts of sexual misconduct between me and my friend Jacob, right? Gets 10 years in prison for 10 years of pleasure between two boys and possibly more victims before us, or who would have came after. Gets 10 years of prison, and it's 2024 right now? This was in 2011.
So he's out.
He would be. He would be free today. Fortunately enough, in 2019, he pleads his parole, pleads for parole or whatever. It was denied, and then he dies a few months later in prison with a staph infection. Or at least that's what I heard from how he died.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, but people like that, we don't need them.
No.
As far as I'm concerned, fucking, if we could identify them, and I know this sounds so extreme, and I just don't fucking care. If we could identify who these people are and just fucking get rid of them,
they need to
let them go. Fucking die, please.
So people who commit serial crimes do not need to be a part of society.
People who hurt innocent people, women, children.
If you murder somebody, that is terrible, and maybe you made a bad mistake. If you murder fucking 15 people, you are not okay. You are gone.
Yeah, there's no reparations after that.
Yeah, you go and molest a child and rape more children. You need to be gone for the rest. There should be no. I mean, think about this. This guy went to court, pleads guilty to raping a little boy, 2 little boys, for years, for 10 fucking years, man. And the guy gets 10 fucking years in prison.
Yeah.
And the judicial system is just like, this is good. We did our job today, you know. Or the laws that be are letting this shit happen.
That wasn't even a year per count.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
fucking
it's, dude,
wild.
And what? So here's when I get my story out, and I think by next year I'll have an organized way to do this, because I know a lot of people are talking about like the wood chipper and shit like that. Okay, I get it. They do deserve the wood chipper, but the wood chipper, taking a wood chipper to Congress is not going to fucking fix anything. We have to do this strategically and like with a good frame of mind, right? And here's the thing. If you've listened to like Matt Murphy, Ryan Montgomery, some of these other guys that are catching these motherfuckers online and getting them, from what I have gathered, and a lot of these like vigilante style guys that are online, and so I can get into a chat room right now and I can say I'm a 12-year-old girl, boom, and I can convince this old man who wants to fuck a little girl to come to Walmart and pick me up, right? To my knowledge, what that guy has done is not illegal. He can talk to a little girl over the phone, but if it's me and you doing it to him, it's not illegal, or at least there's no legal proceeding that can follow that, because it's not a law enforcement agency that's trapping him or catching him or whatever, right? So that's why you see a lot of these YouTube videos now where they're like, hey man, you were coming here to meet a little kid. You're a fucking pedophile. But if you take that to the police, they can't do anything with it because of the laws that be. And
well,
that
it's almost like it's almost like when you do that, you're acting like the police.
Yeah.
And they don't like that. They don't want you. They feel like they have the resources, or maybe they do, maybe they don't. But they probably feel like they have the resources out there trying to do that anyways.
Well, I think it's more of the legal like jargon of what is on paper, right? I think that's more what it is.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things that are inadmissible and admissible in court, right? If you don't read your Miranda rights, and then you're a bunch of other bullshit, right? But here's where like the law needs to fucking change because of technology. If we're not going to change the law because of technology, like there's a fucking problem. So if I can convince this man to show up and meet a little girl if an old man is in a teen chat room, he's already there for no good. He's not there to tell this little girl to go find God. He's there to rape her.
Yeah.
And so if you can convince that person to meet you in a public setting, then there needs to be a law where if I can provide this evidence, this guy is going to prison for the rest of his life. Like that, there should be no arguments there. But the fact that we have to look at this like legal jargon and be like, well, technically this is like entrapment or whatever. It's like, dude, this is fucking bullshit. And one more thing, it makes you wonder who else is doing it, because Ryan Montgomery, if I remember this story correctly, he exposed a fucking politician who had a website dedicated to sex trafficking and children trafficking, sex crimes, and he exposes the guy, and then like 6 months later, the guy gets arrested in the Denver airport with a 12-year-old girl that he had raped and kidnapped. And Ryan Montgomery once again brings the story back up and he says, I told you guys about this guy 6 fucking months ago. Why didn't you do anything then? Now you could have saved this girl's life. So it makes you wonder, like, who's behind the laws, who's doing this to fucking people, and why are they not chasing this shit down? This is $1 billion industry. There's millions of kids every year in our country and around the world there's 8 billion people in the world right now. It's 1 in 4 boys, 1 in 3 girls. That's almost 4 billion people in the world that are being sexually exploited, and we're not doing anything. In the grand scheme of things, we're just not doing anything to stop it. Yeah. If you look at like organizations like the Sentinel Foundation, I know they're doing awesome things, but like their platform should be fucking massive. Yeah. Like there should be so many people pouring into that it's unstoppable. And we should put the fear of God in these fucking guys. And that's what Ryan and Matt are doing. I've heard Ryan talk about it, of putting that fear into these men. Like, if you do this shit, we're going to fucking find you and we're going to kill you.
Yeah, and I think the reason we don't see the traction we'd like on something like that is because of that reason. There aren't enough people out there pushing for it. There aren't enough people up in front of Congress talking about it. They're talking about, which fucking bathrooms people are going to be using, as opposed to, what, how can we address real issues like this, protect children, protect innocent people and all, things like that. So it's just a lack of dedication of the right resources in the right direction. And honestly, not enough people, I think it's one of those things too, like, I'm ignorant on this issue. I don't know a lot of people like yourself that have experienced this. So I think you know what you know and you don't know what you don't know. And if it's not being exposed and it's not being talked about, then you're not going to know what's what, right? So we just need more people. And that's why your story is so important, and why I've been following you as closely as I have for the last few months since we met is I don't see a story out there like yours because nobody talks about this stuff, or not enough people talk about it.
Yeah, and so that's a few months ago, I just came out about this. Like this shit, I held this shit under wraps for like 13, 14 years. Didn't want to tell a soul because it's embarrassing, man. I'm a fucking man. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm an 82nd Airborne combat veteran. I do hard shit. I do freaking jiu-jitsu. I've ran ultra marathons. I've done this like hard shit. I built this persona of like this man, right? How does a man get raped? How does a man get raped and for years by another man, Yep. So it's so prevalent, man. It's so prevalent in the world. And that's why I tell my story. And I want people to realize, like, we have got to do something, man. We've got to protect these kids. And the reason why I've reached out to organizations to speak and to get up on a stage and tell these people, like, tell my story is not to piss anybody off, but is to show the power that I possess because of what I've been through. Like I said before we started this thing, the suffering that I went through has made me endure. My endurance is impeccable. I can do. There's nothing in this world that I can't do because I've already endured the fucking worst shit that you can go through. My character has been tested, right? So when people hear my story, the resume is there, the character is there. It's like, holy shit, okay, this guy knows. There's not that many people that can get through what I went through and come out on the other end and talk about it the way that I have. And I'm not saying I'm better. Fortunately, I am able to do this. There are much worse situations, and those people are so fucked up now they can barely process. The fact that I'm even just walking around as a capable human being is a miracle in its own. I've been told this by many people where they're like, wait a minute, you never got any therapy? You never went to therapy? You never saw a doctor? You never, nothing? No. This shit was a secret for 14 years until just 3-4 months ago. So that's why I tell my story is like, let people know, like, man, this world is dark, but I tell it so people that are ignorant can know how dark it is, but I also tell it for the people who know this world is beautiful as well. I've been to beautiful countries. I've seen beautiful things. I've got an amazing wife, a beautiful wife. I've got 2 beautiful children. I've got an incredible life today. And I'm sitting here with you talking about this story, and I'm healing, man. Like I don't have a bag of rocks like dragging me. I don't have like this weight on my shoulders. And I'm here because I've heard other people's stories. And that is just the power of storytelling. It provides perspective. Perspective provides gratitude. Gratitude freaking makes you stronger, man. When you're able to wake up every day and be like, man, I'm fucking thankful for this shit. Yeah. Like I wake up and I'm like, let's go. Like I'm ready to, some people might be like, damn, man, you worked a full day and then you drove up to Nashville and now you got to drive back the next day. And like, it's like, dude, I get to do this shit, man. Yeah. Like I'm fucking fortunate to be able to sit here with you and talk to guys like you who are willing to help other people fucking grow.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you called out something there a second ago that how healing this is, and that's one of the most, when I got this thing started, one of the things that my girlfriend said to me, she said to me, one of the things that I think you're going to get the most value out of this is just being able to talk, to just be able to share your story, share your thoughts, your ideas, and your perspective on all the things you've gone through. But I just want to make a point. I just got to know you, and I think you're a rock solid fucking guy. I see a combat vet, a father, a great guy. I don't see somebody that got molested. And I fucking hate that shit, man. That you went through that. You have to edit that out. Oh my God, dude. I just don't want you to feel that way.
Well, it's
Like, you're a fucking man. Don't. So, just.
you know, I think one of the things about the warrior mentality is understanding that you go to battle and you go to fight and you go to war and you come back with that stoicism, that stoic, you are scarred and you are damaged and you show up for another day, you show up for another fucking fight. That's the warrior mentality. That is that Spartan fucking epitome of a man, of a warrior that shows up, walks into the fight, walks into the fire. I know that I'm going to get damaged. I know that this shit's going to hurt. I know that the rain is coming, the fire is coming, the mud, it's going to get thick, the water's going to get deep.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get past the shit. It's going to surpass. You know, it's like this too shall pass thing, I think is so powerful because this shit's going to pass. Like, this hard times are going to pass. You can get through them. Now, the thing that nobody talks about too is when you've gone through some hard shit, like I said, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. When you go through some really great shit, this shall pass.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. Yeah. So it's managing those highs and those lows when you get through life. It's not just getting over the bad shit. It's also rebounding from when days you feel like I'm on top of the fucking world, and then the next day your fucking life is just, you don't know why you can't get out of bed. This too shall pass, right? Yeah. You have the days where, man, I'm on top of the world. I just made this great connection. I'm going to be on this podcast. Hey, man, this is going to pass too. So just be ready for it. The hard times are coming back.
Yeah, of course.
It's a roller coaster. It's that warrior mentality.
Yeah, and I say that all the time is, you know, the hard things are great because they condition you for the hard times. The good times, like, they're, like, I say it all the time. I don't do anything for the sake of happiness. I do it for the sake of fulfillment, because happiness is just a short-term emotion that just, it comes and it's gone. It's gone quick. You do the things that bring joy to your heart, joy to your soul, and make you just a better man. And I don't like happy, but I like that the hard stuff. I really truly believe that it conditions you to just be able to do more hard stuff, and it makes a lot of the other things that to a lot of people might seem hard, they make them easier for you, because again, you're conditioned for those things. So, given everything you've been through, like, some of the things that might break a normal person, you're gonna be like, yeah, that's fucking easy. Like, that's nothing. Because I know for myself, that's how I feel. When I hear somebody's like complain about something, I'm like, that's not that bad. Like, you can get through that. Like, you know what I mean? But it's just the way you become wired. You become wired and conditioned to just deal with hard shit.
Yeah, man. That's, you know, like I said, the suffering creates endurance. Yeah. That you are able to endure, right? And then to speak on mental conditioning, when your alarm clock goes off, you have two options: go back to sleep or get up. Every obstacle you come across is an opportunity to condition your mind. Every time you face a challenge, it's an opportunity to condition your mind. Do you take the challenge or do you quit? Sure. Right? Do you take the hard road or you take the easy road? Right? You can even talk about it as far as, you know, in Afghanistan, right? You're driving down the road. Hey, there's this like nice clear road that nobody's traveling on. Yeah. Or I can take the shitty route that everybody else is going on, you know? Mm-hmm. There's a reason why that there's no reward on that clear road. It's a fucking trap, man. Yep. You know? It's a fucking trap. So look for the reward, and it's delayed gratification, man. Delayed gratification is such a powerful tool, because and what I mean by that is, like, if you give a 2-year-old everything they want in life, you give a 2-year-old everything, right? They're always happy, but it's never enough. One is not enough, and 1,000 is too much, right? So a 2-year-old, you keep giving them all these fucking toys, and then all they want is more and more and more and more. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with an adult. Adults, we make impulse purchases, we do dumb shit, we skip the gym, we eat the fat meal, we do the things that make us happy immediately, instead of the reward that comes through suffering and the endurance, or just doing the hard shit. Suffering is a hard term, but just doing the hard things is what humans are built for. And that is where we find gratification. that the reward. Life is going to test you. You know, it is going to test you before it rewards you. It's these rewards just don't come, and you got to be prepared. You got to be prepared for the opportunity. If you're prepared for the opportunity, you will be successful. You can succeed. When those obstacles come, if you're not ready for them, you're going to fail, you know? So it's just a preparation and just being ready and ready to embrace the suck, embrace the hard shit. You know, there's a lot of things you can pull from my story.
Yeah.
I love the warrior thing, though. I can't remember where I saw that, but it was something along the lines of he comes back with a wounded heart. He comes back with a broken shield. He comes back with a cracked helmet. And he fucking saddles up and he's ready to go back, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and just to touch on it, I guess I know we're kind of getting short on time, but that's why I'm writing a book. You know, I'm putting my story out there to let people know that you can survive, you can overcome adversity, and it's going to take a lot of reflection. For so many years, I was a victim. I had a victim mentality for a long time. I was $60,000 in debt with a daughter on the way. I was, you know, very mean towards my wife. I told my wife when we got married, actually 3 months into dating, I told her I was fucked up, right? So then when we got married and we get into arguments and I've wanted to leave my wife, and I've actually never talked about this on a podcast before, but there's been several times where I've like told my wife, I don't know if I want this anymore, right? And I was doing all of this shit because I told her, you did this. You married me and you knew I was fucked up. And this is your fault. This is what you got to deal with. And if you can't handle me, then you don't need to be with me. And, you know, a good friend of mine said, how masculine is that, right? How masculine is it that we take all of our problems and we put it on my fucking wife and my family? How masculine of me is that, right? How tough am I to take all of my problems and blame somebody else for it? You know, and that's taken a lot of reflection for me to be able to take my life, my journey, look the snake in the fucking eyes and be like, this is the way you get through it, is by acknowledging the problems, acknowledging how jacked up you might be. That's how you get through it. You don't get through it by running from it. If you run from it, you're just like the cow in the storm. You're going to suffer. You're going to suffer. It's going to rain. You're going to be miserable. You're not going to get anything out of it. So that's why I tell my story, and that's why I'm writing a book.
I've done that as well, you know, with my upbringing and just relationships and trying to take all of my shit and transfer it anywhere else it can go, right? Outside of me. But, you know, I learned the hard way, you know. As soon as I just ate it all and took all the accountability and all the, you know, the shit and just took it all myself and held myself accountable and dealt with it all and made everything my fault. I tell myself that everything's my fault. And once you take that approach, it puts you on a different spectrum of just accountability, and that stuff pushes out to everything else in your life. When you hold yourself accountable in one area, it translates. Just like when you have discipline in one area, like you start at the gym, it translates.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, this was a good fucking talk, man. It's the first time I got really emotional in a podcast, just because, god damn, man, like if you feel like less of a man because of the bullshit you went through, that fucking makes me so angry, because the way you've gotten through it and the way you've kicked it in the ass and the fact that you're willing to share it to the fucking world is just, that's a man. That's a man. You're holding yourself accountable to not just like internally, you're letting everybody know. Like you can get through this shit and you're sharing it and you're holding yourself accountable. Like, you're not sitting here saying like, oh, I'm fucking better than people. You're saying, I'm actually not better than anybody. I'm just sharing my story. And that's the idea behind it, is to just share it, like I said earlier, and try to get as many people on board with this message as you possibly can. And I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm really grateful that, you know, you reached out a few months ago to come on. And I'm even more grateful now to call you a friend, man. I think you're a great guy, and just appreciate it, man. Really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you too. You know, a little shameless plug here. Obviously, if anybody wants to connect, it's just Instagram. Go Beyond the Shadows, Seth Gehle. You'll find me if you look me up. But
I'm gonna be putting everything on Instagram. Man.
Yeah,
Everybody's
yeah,
know
yeah.
who the fuck you are.
yeah, so this is the first one I'll say. Maybe the first one I've gotten this fired up one. So you got a little emotion out of me. I usually don't get. But I appreciate you, man, and thank you for allowing me to share my story and speak to the audience and fight the fucking cause, man. Fight for these kids and life in general. So appreciate you.
Absolutely, man. And if there's ever anything that like me or Mike, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Mike couldn't be here.
Yeah.
He's my best friend and co-host. But if there's ever anything we can do to help out, let us know, and we'll sponsor whatever. We'll be a part of whatever. Because obviously we support what you're doing. So appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right.